Welcome, everyone, to Ladder Daily Digest. We honor creators, and today we have Tim Rathbone, who's had some interesting jobs at BYU, and we're going to find all about that. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Debbie Donovan is joining me. Thanks for co-hosting.
Yeah, of course.
And so we will interrupt you every now and then when we have a question based on something that you're saying, but in the meantime, let us know a little bit about your background, your 5-minute life sketch up until the time of your mission or whatever.
Okay. I was born in Santa Monica, California on Sunday, August 22nd, 1954 at 10:30, I think about. I attended Westwood 2nd Ward, which is the building behind the LA Temple, for 18 years and about 11 months. Westwood 2nd Ward consisted of doctors, lawyers, UCLA, USC professors, and other professionals. My father was an engineer. Mom worked for Soaring Society of America. My father was a pilot. He was not active for most of my life. Mom was the one that took us to church.
So did you have somebody else baptize you then?
Yes. Yeah.
A relative or the elders quorum president or something?
I have no idea who it was. I used to know the name, but I don't remember it anymore.
And then were there a lot of youth when you were young? Were you ever like deacon's quorum or teacher's quorum president or anything?
I was president of every, yes. We had like 6 or 8 of us guys. Well, we could see there was Westwood Ward, which was north of Santa Monica Boulevard, and we were south of Santa Monica Boulevard. Westwood Ward encompassed Bel Air, both encompassed part of Beverly Hills. Bel Air for Westwood Ward. The rich people, the really rich people, were north. And we were in a pretty well-to-do ward. We had a lot of liberal people in our ward. Brett Rushforth was the lawyer who sued over the oil wells in Santa Barbara. Bob Reese, and
I actually met him at Sunstone, I think.
Well, she passed away a few years ago.
I met him.
Yeah, you met Bob. It was real eclectic. See, I thought we were all Democrats because my parents were Democrats. So I thought Mormons were Democrats. It was a fun ward to grow up in. But we combined our mutuals with Westwood Ward and Westwood 2nd Ward. The primaries were separate, but we did combine mutuals. And I was in Scouts.
Did you become an Eagle Scout?
No, I think first class, so as far as I went.
Me too, as well, I think.
Our program kind of fell apart.
I was too interested in like basketball. And
John Carmack was my stake president for a while. Bill Tanner. I was the ward babysitter. I used to babysit for the Andersons, the Paulsons, the Carmacks, and the Tanners.
Wow. There's a lot of famous names there.
Yeah, I know.
Probably paid well.
Pardon?
I said they probably paid well. It's a good job.
Oh, they paid very well. They paid very well. Yeah. Yeah, Lynn Paulson was my elders quorum president when I became an elder.
Did you go to local college or did you just...
I did 1 semester at Santa Monica, 2 semesters at Santa Monica City College. Well, I went to Overland. Well, I went to Clover Avenue, then to Overland, then Palms Junior High and Hamilton High School. And there weren't a lot of Mormons that I knew of at Palms. Most of the Mormons who went to Hammy were from Culver City.
What were you saying, Debbie?
Oh, I was going to say, where did you end up going on your mission?
Well, I'll get there.
Okay.
So you had early mornings.
A huge scholar as well. Like, was that always an interest to you as a youth? Like
did you read books?
Reading.
History is very important. My great grandfather Chaim Solomon financed the American Revolution. Basically, my family has deep roots in the country on both my parents' side, but more dads than mom. So we used to go to Star Valley, Afton, Wyoming for vacation. And my grandfather was a polygamist. He had 1 wife in Afton and another in Bear Lake.
Who doesn't?
Yeah, he had 2 wives. Well, he had one that died, and then she told him to marry the 2 sisters, and he did.
Wow.
So,
your
grandpa was a polygamist and then married a mother and a sister, or 2 sisters?
Well, he married.
So you had your grandpa as his wife die, but as his wife was dying, she said it was okay to marry two women who were sisters.
The Barker sisters, yes. And one lived in Bear Lake, and the other one lived in Afton.
Okay.
And each family accused the other of him spending more time with the other family.
You think that would be a problem for everybody in that system?
And I think both families are about 12 or 13 kids each, too, if I remember right. And one was more boys than girls.
Were they
So
following mainstream polygamy, like, or they were still part of the church, or were they part of a fundamentalist group?
Part of the church. He was arrested.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there was a cabin up in the if you look at a map of Star Valley, and there's a town called Freedom, and it's on the border of Idaho and Wyoming. And they would go there and stand on the Idaho side of the street when the Wyoming sheriff came. And then when the Idaho sheriff came, they'd go on the other side.
That's the same thing with the Southern Utah polygamists. Yeah. They would go to Arizona or vice versa, whatever. It's like, yeah, they're snowbirds, but only 1 mile apart.
Right. So my grandfather taught me about polygamy and Joseph Smith when I was a kid.
Yeah, because I think it's interesting that we as, well, the Mormon church hid polygamy until 1852 and announced it publicly. And then because the reorganized church were saying, oh, Joseph Smith didn't want polygamy, it's just the Brighamites. Then Joseph F. Smith went around getting affidavits so that he could prove to his cousin, Joseph Smith III, that Joseph Smith Jr. did practice polygamy.
And that was the time where Joseph's boys showed up in Salt Lake, and they thought that they were going to take over the church.
Because they had some legal battles going with property ownership and different things.
Yes.
And maybe the purse, right? The money of the church should belong to the real church.
Right.
Yeah.
Was there any ever disputes on the copyright of the Book of Mormon after? Because I know Joseph tried to sell it, but then after that, was there like some ownership to like, well, he translated this, so we should get a percentage of whatever's.
I don't know that.
That's a good question. And so, but back to your story. So you went to early morning seminary?
Only 1 year,
okay.
My senior year. I didn't go before that. I had a girlfriend, and that's the only reason I went. And then we broke up.
So you went to college locally for a little bit, and then did you go on your mission, or
we moved from LA to Colorado Springs, and in August 73, August 18th, I entered the mission home, and then on my birthday, the 22nd, I went down to the LTM at Amanda Knight Hall and went to language training mission, and then.
So did you work and save up for your mission, or did you have 70s in your ward?
No, my dad paid for it.
Oh, your dad paid.
My dad paid for it and wrote it off in his taxes.
And then Debbie wants to know where?
Germany. Dusseldorf. Deutschland, Dusseldorf, Mission. And I loved it. I love classical music, and to go to Germany was like a dream come true. And I was fascinated with World War II, so that also. But I enjoyed my mission. I had a lot of fun. I learned a language, and I got to visit places I'll probably never see again.
Did you see like bombed out areas, or had they fixed everything?
They found unexploded ordnance in Essen. They were digging for the subway, and they found unexploded bombs. There were still unexploded churches and buildings in the center and north of the city center. There was a bombed out church we went to.
Now, how did they do meetings? Did they rent places?
No, my first city I went to was Detmold, and we had a family come from another town, and we rented a small room behind somebody's house off of a garage. It's like a storage room. And I was there from October to December of 73. And then I went to Paderborn, and they renting a building, but we had a building southwest part of town.
And everything was branches?
Those were branches. And then I went to Essen, and that was a ward. They have a real chapel there. And then I went to Oberhausen, and they rented the second floor of the building, but now they had their own chapel.
Did you ever have to have a job?
East and West, there was still a wall, correct?
There was still a wall. Yes, there was still a wall. And I would, when we do street board in Potterborn, I talked to people who were from the East. They drove trucks back and forth delivering goods. And I gave one guy, probably a couple of Book of Mormon. They told me where they were from, like they were from Dresden or somewhere like that in the East. And I knew where it was. I knew my geography. Gave them Book of Mormon.
And so you had a good experience on your mission.
I had a great experience on my mission.
And were you thinking of, did you apply for BYU as you're getting ready to come back?
No. I came home to a brand new house. My parents had moved from one house to another. They built their own house. And my bishop was from Germany. I worked for my father for a few months. And then in January, I went to Rick's. Well, I applied at BYU and I didn't hear back from them. And so my mother and I drove to Rick's and I spent a semester at Rick's. I came home and I worked for my dad for 4 or 5 years. And then I went to BYU.
Okay. So your mission was just a 2-year mission.
Yeah, it was just 2 years. When I applied at BYU, they lost my paperwork and they found it years later. It fell down behind a desk or something.
Wow.
Yeah.
And somebody said, if he's still alive, let's let him in.
Well, when I got there, somebody told me about it. I can't remember who.
Maybe that was the office doc. Like, oh, he's the Tim Rathbone that we lost the paperwork. Ha, ha, ha. The Lord works in mysterious ways.
Oh, boy, yeah.
And so what were you a history major?
I was a history major, yes, indeed.
Were you going to teach history then the rest of your life? Was that the goal?
That was my plan. My plan was to teach history and to work for the church. Yeah. And
so you wanted to teach college history?
Yes.
Okay. So you already were thinking a master's degree in history or something?
Yes, I was.
What was the history program like there when you were going to school? Like, were there any significant professors that we would know? Or
Mike Quinn,
okay.
Marv Hill, Dean Jesse, Frank Falk. Can't remember the others.
And so you worked on campus to help pay for things or mainly to buy food?
To pay rent and food, yeah, to live. And I got a job with the grounds crew. We pruned bushes all around the campus and found some interesting things.
Ooh, what'd you find? Tunnels?
Like condoms, bottles of whiskey?
Condoms, yeah, whiskey bottles, love letters. There was actually 2 guys. There was a chapel up by the stadium that they were in charge of, and they would pay girls to take nude photographs of them in the chapel. This all came out, I think it was the spring of 82.
How
progressive. Yeah, I know.
I wonder what they were doing, like Mormon secret calendars, before the internet. Distribution would have been a little more dicey.
I don't know, but when we found out about it, it was kind of wild. I mean, it was really wild when that happened. I don't know how they got caught, but somebody spilled the beans. And then I went to work in the archive.
And where were the archives?
In the library on the 4th floor, northeast corner. And we had a room downstairs we called the dungeon. Well, we had stuff stored in every nook and cranny and every storeroom under every stairwell in that building, not counting the university archives, which is a building unto itself, east of the library, south of
Are the
Wilkins.
archives accessible to students, or is that like you have to be in a specialty major or have permission?
Anybody could come in and see what they wanted. And I worked for Dennis Rowley as a was a collections processor and I microfilm stuff.
I heard a rumor. Was there stuff under BYU Stadium? Someone says there's a bunch of archive storage under the stadium.
A dinosaur Jim stored his dinosaur bones there.
Oh, so that is true.
Yeah, I saw those. Yeah, see, I went back to work for grounds for a summer or something because they rebuilt the stadium and we were pruning bushes around the stadium and this gate, big huge iron gate, fell. It was Friday, and the next day they had a game and it fell on some kid and crushed his pelvis.
But did we win?
I don't know. I went to 1 season of football games and that was enough. I didn't care for it.
So did you ever take trips up to Salt Lake City and go visit Sandra and Gerald Tanner?
Yeah, but I used to also take trips to the church archives Tuesday and Thursday, I go to church archives and do research.
And so what
was your
research were you
main
doing?
topic? Oh, go ahead.
Were you working for somebody to do research or just on your own?
Some of it I was doing for others and some was on my own. Like if Dennis would ask me to do something, I'd go to the church archives if we didn't have it, and they'd call, well, Tim needs to see this. He'll be here at that time. And so I'd get up in the morning and I'd take the bus up to Salt Lake and do research and go home that night. Yeah.
I was gonna say, what was your main focus, or what was your most interest as far as research? Like, what was your favorite topic?
Well,
had
early
most
church
interest for you?
history, anything prior to the Exodus. And I was looking for my relatives also. I just wanted to read and I just, in the 70s, when I lived in Colorado Springs, I'd go to Institute there. I often wondered what was behind the 7-volume history of the church. And I found out that there were documents. I knew about footnotes, so I knew that there were things that weren't included in the text. Well, how can I go see these things? Oh, well, they're in the church archives. Okay, because I just didn't read Mormon history. I read history, American history mostly.
So who was what's his name that wrote this 7-volume history? Like a
B.H. Roberts.
B.H. Roberts.
Do you know, are those archives, are they still available, or have they kind of hidden some of that older
I don't know.
history?
I haven't been in the archives since 2000. I could see just about anything I wanted. And there was one guy there, Brother Kimball, who would make copies for me, even though I wasn't supposed to. I edited David W. Patton's diary that I've since sadly lost, but I did that for Dean Jesse's class. I just had a lot of questions. I wanted to find out what the earliest reference and the earliest source was for an event. So I was just plowing through 12 apostle diaries and anybody letters and stuff. And I stumbled upon all kinds of things.
I was
Did
gonna
they
say,
have-
who was your
Okay.
most interesting prophet, or what was if you have access to that kind of records, I would think there would be some little surprising nugget where you were like, wow, I never knew
Well,
this.
when I wrote a paper for MHA on the GNC 76, because there was a whole congregation in Geneseo, New York that rejected it. Excuse me. And then when they went to England, they published a broadside because they didn't tell people about the 3 degrees of glory. And I stumbled on that and I wrote a paper about it. And I found the minutes for the court that didn't make it into the Joseph Smith letter book. Only part of it did. And I showed it to Mike Quinn, and this is really interesting. So I wrote a paper about that. Then when I worked I wasn't supposed to tell people I worked for farms, but I worked with Jack Welch, and I got paid through the religion department like everybody did who worked for farms. Basically, when I worked for Jack, I could see things I'd asked for before that I couldn't see, but I could see them then when I worked with Jack.
What types of things did you do for him?
That Book of Mormon translation paper, or chronology on Book of Mormon translation, that's where I saw a copy of the copyright, not the Canadian copyright, but the actual application for copyright that Joseph filed with federal government copyright office.
Was that
But
public or no?
it was an attachment to that paper, so yeah, it should be.
And should it be in the Joseph Smith Papers project now?
I don't know, maybe
Have you ever looked through the Joseph Smith Papers
a
project to
little
see
bit,
stuff that you might have handled or something?
probably. I I plowed through so much. I mean,
Well, I think that's what makes you unique, because I've always had this theory that the church has always been very guarded about what history is allowed to be researched or even looked at. I mean, you see how long it took to put out the Joseph Smith papers. So having that kind of access, did you ever feel like there was a lot of pushback to what you could or couldn't write about or research?
no, I did not feel it, but I know others did. like the paper was published in Sunstone about post-manifesto polygamy, and then Mark's article about post-manifesto polygamy. But while I was in the archives, Seventh East Press started up. There was Ernest, okay, Ernest Strack was a polygamist, and he had Grandpa's books. And at the south end of campus, there was Kinko's copies, Grandpa's books, and Seventh East Press upstairs. And Ernest had all these documents that you could go make copies of, and I added to that. With things that I found in the archives, I'd make copies and give them to him and others.
Now, did you trade stuff to him when you gave him things, or was it just fun to do?
I didn't trade with, no, I wasn't a trader. I just wanted to disseminate the information. And that gets back to with Ron and Gary, when they were writing their book on BYU, they wanted the
Ron Curtis and Gary Bergera.
Wanted access to Wilkinson's diaries, and they wouldn't give it. So some of us knew where they were in the dungeon and went down and got them, shared them with Ron and Gary.
So you resorted to subterfuge.
Yeah, I made anything that I wanted a copy of. I made copies of.
So you helped Gary and Ron. Did you know them well then back then?
Yes and no. I did not realize how duplicitous they are, however, but I did know that.
Has the church now put all of that stuff online, or is it still sitting in old school books, journals, like you can't access it?
A lot of the stuff in the archives is online, I found. Brigham Young's diaries are.
I bet he was an interesting cat. What was his personality like? Because you probably read his journals.
Yeah, I made a typescript that they used in the signature book, but don't give me credit for. I was editing his diaries, and they stole that from me. There wasn't a lot in there that was personal. The one thing that I found fascinating was all the women he met in England. He and Heber and Willard met in England, and they married him when they got to America. And I suspect that Brigham visited ladies of the evening or had some tryst there, but Mike doesn't think so. But I suspect they were taking advantage of people, women in England.
So when Heber C. Kimball complains that the missionaries are getting all the good-looking recruits, he's pointing a finger at Brigham Young, you think?
I think so. Yeah. Brigham and Heber. Yeah. Or was it Heber who said that? No, either Brigham or
I think Heber said that in a talk.
Yeah, it maybe. Yeah.
Maybe he excluded his and Brigham's wives from that.
See, but if you go through their diaries and you read the names of the women they know, they end up marrying them later on. So there was always a connection.
They were already keeping a binder full of women.
The little black book.
They wrote the name in the diary. They wrote their names in the diary. If you go to the diaries, their names are written in the front and the back of the diary of women they met. So something was going on there.
Well, there was a rumored, well, it's not rumored, the Sweetheart District where the Salt Lake Tribune used to operate, they even have a plaque there in that alleyway, like this once was the Ladies of the Night area. And it's not far from Temple Square. I mean, skip, and
well, you need to remember that there were Mormons spying on the prostitutes and the federal judges.
So they can have dirt on them?
Yeah. Yeah. They would spy on them. Well, and who were they renting from? They were renting from the church. The church owned all that land.
Well, they owned the Hotel Utah too. You couldn't go to a nice hotel with a lady without them probably knowing. They were the first ones to monopolize the honey pot and make it a little bit of a
honey pot. Does that have something to do with Deseret? Is that what you're talking about?
No, that's like this, like a CIA honey pot where they get you with a lady and then use the incriminating information.
Right.
Yeah.
Blackmail.
Yeah. Blackmail.
Brigham was ahead of his time.
Very much so. Well, he knew how to sway people.
Was there a point in time where you then lost your testimony from church history or other things?
It was a combination of a bunch of things. When I found out that the priesthood how the restoration had been lied about.
Right, they backdated.
Backdated. When I couldn't find any evidence, and I talked to Brett Metcalf about it, or Dan, or Grant Palmer, or Mike. We talked. Well, where is it? It's got to be here somewhere. And where have you looked? I'm trying to find it, and I can't find it. It was a bunch of things. It was. See, I got to BYU after Packer gave his mantle speech, and then Mike gave his response. And
so Leonard Arrington had already moved to BYU by then?
Yeah, they moved down there a few years before I got there. The Smith Institute was south of the history department, and on that floor down further south, or east, I mean. It was a northeast building, east-west, anyway. Yeah, Leonard was there. Yeah, Dean and Ron Walker and Bill Hartley and Ron Esplin and Mary Brad, not Mary, anyway, can't remember her name, anyway.
Did you have any interaction with Leonard Arrington?
I talked to Leonard a few times. He always would say, I wrote a paper about that. No, you didn't. And I pointed out a couple of mistakes in the Brigham Young book. Well, that's what I knew at the time. Oh, okay. All right, fine. Yeah.
That book was called Lion of the Lord, Brigham Young, Lion of the Lord.
Yes. Really good book, but it's got a few mistakes in it.
And Leonard Arrington had been working on what is it, 150-year anniversary of history. Did any of that ever get published, or does it still exist somewhere?
It got published. I don't know if they all got published, but like Bachman did his Kirtland book, and
Mike Quinn was doing things for it.
Yeah, Bushman did his early Joseph Smith book. I don't know how many of the list is in the book, Story of the Latter-day Saints. In the end of the book, there's a list of all the books they wanted to publish. You could go to there and see which ones have been published and which ones haven't. Tom Alexander did his book. I have to look at the list to see which books have and haven't been published.
How many people were writing?
8 to 10, I think.
8 to 10 people.
So I think even Brother Porter was supposed to write one. I don't know if Larry ever did his.
Ooh, did they ever do any books on the Council of 50 or Porter Rockwell or some of the?
There's two books on Porter. There's 2 books on Porter Rockwell. The Council of 50 just got published up to 1840. What, 5? Nothing after that. But it just got published. See, Dean Jesse wanted to do Joseph Smith papers, so they finally got that off the ground. What, 30 years later?
What did you think about the Mark Hoffman scandal when that came out?
I met Mark when
really?
I was doing research on David Patton. Lynn Jacobs called me and said, "We have this elder's license we'd like to sell you, Patton." I went, "Really?" Also, in the back of Brigham Young's desk, there's he stuffed a copy of Section 76. Really? How do you know this, Lynn? Because Mark told me. Okay. Well, how much do you want for it? And he quoted a price. Nah, just give me a Xerox copy. We can't do that. I met Mark at Grandpa's Books. I didn't like it. I felt something was really fishy about him. He was squirrely. He and Lynn were squirrely. So
that makes sense.
When they thought I was a rich guy and I could afford this. But I was doing research on McClellan, and I even was interviewed by the Salt Lake detectives.
That's right, because the thing that was the McClellan papers or whatever that he was forging. Mark Hoffman was forging those.
His plan was but he was also forging the 116 pages. His plan was to forge Martin Harris. I think when I went to MHA back in Missouri in '86, and Dean Jesse gave his presentation on the Martin Harris handwriting, I think there were 6 or 7 samples, and like 4 of them were Hoffman forgeries. He didn't know it at the time, but Mark was forging Martin Harris, just like the Salamander letter. He forged that. And his plan was to produce 116 pages.
Is there any, in all your research in the archives or history, was there any other topic or gossip about what happened to those 116 pages, or what they tell us is pretty much accurate, that he loaned them out and they're lost?
Well, I had a friend, Scott Morley, who was a missionary back in Pennsylvania. Pinnock was his mission president. Hugh Pinnock was his mission president. And he and his companion were basically tasked with finding 116 pages. When they were on their days off, they were visiting antique stores and stuff and knocking on people's doors to see if anybody had any information. So I know Scott was on the mission at the same time I was during that time, that there was an effort, good effort made to find them, at least from 73 to 75. Yeah, the story that you keep running into is Lucy got him and did something with Lucy Harris. And did something with them.
She probably burned them, just like a woman.
I
mean,
sure.
thinking as
That
a
makes
woman,
sense.
that's what that would do.
Yeah. No, that was a question I had too, and I never could find an answer for that.
So I heard that at one point that they took D&C 132 out of the scripture or the canon.
That's news to me.
I was going to say, I had a friend tell me that they took it out and then put it in. And I was wondering if you ever knew why they decided to get rid of it.
I don't know. My grandfather was bothered they took the lectures on faith out of the D&C, though.
Yeah. Why did they do that? Do you know? Too controversial?
I think that's because when I was the eldest quorum president, I wanted to teach them, and my bishop said no.
I wonder if they'll ever get rid of the Book of Abraham and say the same thing. Like, maybe we shouldn't be teaching this.
Maybe. Well, that'll ruin everything, though. They have to get rid of the temple.
I know.
Well, now we know that there's temporary commandments. Maybe there's temporary scriptures, temporary Holy Ghost. I've joked that every time I repented, it was temporary. So might as well.
Right on. Yeah.
So as a person who grew up in Utah, the rumor is that the church has those caves up in the foothills that are full of archived history. Is that a rumor? You can say what?
Well, okay, they microfilm everything.
Okay.
And if you want to see an original document, they are stored up there in the vault.
Oh.
Because when I wanted to see one of the histories, I wanted to see the original document. I didn't want to see the microfilm because I couldn't make out something on it. And I had to tell them, and it took them a day to get it from the vault. So, and it's smart. It's, I don't fault them for that. I think it's good practice to store those documents.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but there are some things that were in the archives that I could see right away, but there are others that were up in the vault and took a day or two to get it down. If I'd be there Tuesday, I said, well, I want to see it Thursday, and I'd show up on Thursday, and it would be there, and I could look at it.
See, Tim, you've already confirmed 2 of my Mormon theories: the vault and the dinosaurs under the stadium.
Yeah,
amazing.
They're really big too. I mean, I remember looking at those.
I wonder why they don't display those. Right?
Well, they do have the Bean Museum,
Mm-hmm. That's full of stuffed animals.
That's right. Oh. What's another theory?
Well, I think the Mark Hoffman, definitely, how that, if that was as sensational during its time as I thought it was.
Well,
So,
I was working for BYU Studies then, or with them. I was doing the footnotes for Marv Hill's article. I was double checking his footnotes. And there was a box in one of the desks that nobody knew what was in it. And BYU security came and remotely they opened the drawer and they opened the box and it was just some doilies. But we were scared. I mean, I was in Salt Lake the day before the explosion.
and then I guess my last theory is, if maybe you've seen history of this, is that I've always said that there's a secret society within the society, because Mormons do love the secrets.
Yes, there is.
Like, okay, yeah.
Well,
And
see,
it's
because
always,
Joseph Smith had the anointed quorum, right?
yeah.
Who was separate. The reason that this is my theory, is the reason that he created the endowment was to keep polygamy a secret. It had nothing to do with anything else. It was people binding themselves to Joseph to keep it a secret. And I've heard from temple workers in Salt Lake that there is some kind of a secret society that's above the rest.
Yeah.
Any more than that, I don't know.
That's right. So
Yeah.
they had to get the rather than do so, I would suffer my life to be taken oath to scare people into keeping the secret.
Now, see, I had something to do with that too. I sent my recommend to a friend and he taped the changes and typed it up. The document that Sandra sold, the changes from 1990, pre-1990 and post-1990. My friend is the one who went to the temple with my recommend and taped it, typed it up. So if you read the introduction to that, it is kind of accurate. I think it was in an Ellis Quorum presence at the time. And I had temple workers in the LA temple in my ward. And they talked to the LA Times. And they're quoting back to me. It was like, if you only knew.
What time, like what point? Okay, because it changed the ritual so much. Was this still when they were doing the blood oath and the?
Yeah, that April 1990 is.
Yeah. Okay.
See, there were a couple of things that happened. Okay, my friend published this document called Elohim at the Altar by Boham Yazkin or something like that, and I made copies of it and I spread it around like wildfire. I gave a copy to Mike when he was in LA once, and sent copies to friends, and just and this person is he's high in the Masons. He's high in the Masons back in Washington, D.C. And he wrote this document documenting everything Masonic in the temple ceremony. And we published this document and sent it out. And then they also did a survey for people in the temple and what they didn't like. And a lot of women complained that men were copying fields.
In that
On the
5 points of fellowship. 5 points of fellowship. I swear I had an old man do a little bit of something on me once. I believe it.
When I used to be a bell worker, and I wouldn't even consider that. I mean, I did women, and I was like, no, no. Just
I chalked it up to that he was old and didn't know what he was touching, but
yeah, right. Right. Yeah, right. No, yeah. A lot of perverts in the church.
a lot of perverts.
Yeah.
Well, the whole washing and anointing gets that ball rolling.
Well, see, I hear about guys who got their penis touched. They ran it across the small of my back is when I got that blessing. It's like, what are you talking about? They never touched me there.
Can you imagine? Oh my gosh.
What?
Well, just because boys are not even allowed to touch their own penis, and then you go through the temple for the first time and someone's doing the little.
I don't
And
believe it.
bonus.
I find it really hard to believe that their penis ever got touched by anybody.
Okay, we'll stick with that.
You know, I mean, I did lots of watches. Before my mission, I went to the LA Temple probably every day, every other day, you know, to go through watches during the endowment. I mean, it was right up the street. It was like 5-10 minutes away from my house. And I went there and I did you know, I wanted to learn about it because it was really fascinating to me. I enjoyed the endowment. Okay. I'm one of those who really liked it.
I
It
went to
turned my
washing
dad.
and anointings, so I never got woo-wooed in that ceremony. I always thought it was really interesting. Like it seemed like the nicest part of the temple, like someone's just blessing your whole body. Like,
Yes.
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 So
Yes.
I felt like that was cool.
Yeah, I really.
Is the washing and anointing Masonic? Are there ties to the Okay.
Yeah, everything in the temple ties to Masonry. See, okay,
What about
John.
baptism for the dead? Because I know they resurrect Hiram Abiff in the Masonic, but it seems to baptize. Is that?
I don't know if they have that. I don't remember. If they have that or not. But they do have the raising up with the bear claw, which is the second token of the Melchizedek priesthood, with the grip. I don't know. But you guys got to get. See, everybody needs to get this book. Oh.
It's like a backyard professor moment.
I know. I was gonna say, I like a good book.
I don't have a very big library here. A lot of my books are in storage, but everybody needs to get this book.
Who wrote it?
Bernard. Art de Hoyos edited it, but the guy who wrote it was.
What was it called? Mormon and Masonry?
No, it's called Light on Masonry by Bernard. It has every single ceremony in it.
Oh, that would be interesting.
I actually was looking up on the internet around 2010 or so because I could never remember what to say at the veil. I couldn't remember it. So I thought, well, if somebody recorded it and they had the either a PDF of it or a movie of it, I could watch it or read it over and over again until maybe someday I could remember it. And so it did start to look a little weird, you know, when I saw the movie.
What is wanted? Adam have been true and faithful desires now to converse with Lord through the veil. Presented with the veil is requested we wanted. Right? What is that? Yep. The first token of the Aaronic priesthood. Has it a name? It has. Will you give it to me? I will through the veil. What is that? The second token of the Aaronic priesthood. Has it? Well, okay. The first token has a name. It has. Will you give it to me? I will through the veil. Noah. What is that? The second
Noah.
token of the priesthood.
I don't remember Noah.
Hang on. That's the given name. That's your secret name. That's my simple name. Okay, Noah. Okay, knock. You know what is wanted? The second token of the Aaronic priesthood has a name. It has. We give it to me. I will through the veil. Thomas. Okay, what is that? The first token of the Melchizedek priesthood, or sign of the nail, has it a name? It has. We give it to me. I will through the veil. The sign. What is that? The second token of the Melchizedek priesthood, the patriarchal grip, or sign of the nail. Has it a name? It has. Will you give it to me? I cannot. I have not received it. I have not yet received it. For this purpose I have come to converse with the Lord through the veil. Will you give it to me? I will upon the 5 points of fellowship through the veil. This is the name of the token: health in the navel, marrow in the bones, strength in the loins and in the sinews, power in the priesthood, be upon me and upon my posterity through all generations of time and throughout all eternity. What is that? The second token of the Melchizedek priesthood, the patriarchal grip, or sure sign of the nail. Has it a name? It has. Will you give it to me? I will upon the 5 points of fellowship through the veil. Health in the navel, marrow in the bones, strength in the loins and in the sinews, power in the priesthood, be upon me and upon my posterity throughout all generations of time and throughout all eternity.
There you go.
What is knock? What is wanted? Adam.
Yeah, three raps.
Veil desires now to enter his presence. Let him enter. See. I got it all memorized.
Yeah, it was. I could never be a temple worker at the Veil because my brain just wouldn't be able to remember it. Just a weird
I
thing.
think the temple sessions were definitely more interesting when they were live. When they were
I love Manti. I love Salt Lake. I love those live
sessions. I don't think they're going to do live sessions at Salt Lake anymore. I think it's going to be that
but they do in Manti. Manti has
it.
Yes.
Even after they restored it, they kept it live.
That's what I've heard.
Somebody said the weird thing about
Salt Lake live.
Pardon? I think Salt Lake's gone. I think they destroyed that, which is
somebody
sad.
said the weird thing about the live was that Eve would be like a 90-year-old wrinkled lady. And it just didn't register to them as something that could really happen.
You didn't get the spring chicken vibe off of her? What are you saying? She'd been withered in that garden, okay? It was really rough. At least she didn't have to see her naked.
That's right. The lone and dreary wilderness.
The lone and dreary world.
So Tim, you've appeared on lots of shows before, and often you would say that you didn't have permission to say certain things. Is there an update on
that? The one is about the Wilkinson diary, how me and somebody else leaked it out of the BYU archives. And then when I was editing Marv Hill's article, Richard Anderson had Lucy Mack Smith's history in his office. And I would go in there to check it. And one night, I said, you know what? I'm just going to go make a copy of this. Because he held onto that thing like I could see it when he was there. But one day he left. I trust you, you know. So I went and copied it. But I couldn't get back in the building. I couldn't get back in the Joseph Smith building. So I found my friend Janie and Sam. And Sam was the janitor in the building. So luckily I had the key so I could get back in there.
Right. He's like the prophet. He holds the keys.
I couldn't believe it. It was like, oh man, yes. You know.
You were about to get busted with your hand in the cookie jar.
And then I made a copy of it. And I gave a copy to Ernest and I gave a copy to Gary. And you would not have that book that Lavina did of Lucy's history if it weren't for me.
Wow. That's amazing because that's an interesting history for sure.
So I know that Emma's history was edited, or was that Lucy's? Were there two volumes, two different volumes?
Her history, Joseph Smith history, yeah. The one that Brigham Young learned.
Brigham Young edited that one, but you had like the original copy?
This is the manuscript.
The manuscript, okay.
This is a copy of the manuscript.
So you still have a shoebox of all the things like that?
No, sadly, all my documents. I had a storage unit that got sold. Somebody was supposed to keep paying rent and they didn't. So I lost everything. All my books and all my documents.
Wow.
All I have left is what I sent. I sent that link to. I think I sent it to you, and I sent it to Debbie, my Google Drive. That's all pretty much. I have stuff on hard drives, but I can't get at it. I've got to find somebody who charges a reasonable price to recover stuff. But I had a guy try to recover off these hard drives, and he couldn't.
He wasn't skilled enough?
He didn't work for the FBI.
No, I don't think he had the right equipment to do it. There's a person here in town, but they want a lot of money to do it. So, and I don't have that kind of money right now.
So I have one more theory, conspiracy theory that maybe you can insight on. So the Satanic Panic, remember that?
Oh yes.
Glenn Pace, was his name Glenn Pace? Was the Pace letter that he wrote?
I think it was Glenn Pace.
Yeah. That's verifiable. That's a real letter.
Yes.
And then was there any other conversation? I mean, because it seems like that's the only thing we know about that. And then there's nothing else, like no other conversation. He went on a mission and it was the end of the story.
Well, there's the Black Endowment, what's called the Black Endowment, because Robert Black had a copy of it that was an endowment created very sexual. Like it, in the prayer circle, the women would be holding the man's penis, and the men would hold the woman's breast or vagina.
And was this actually done in the temple?
Not in the temple, but by members in the Salt Lake Valley.
Oh, okay.
This is like that society that I was telling you about.
Secret society.
They call it the Black Endowment because Robert Black had a copy of it. He wouldn't let me make a copy, but I read it.
I heard the AUB had a similar kind of temple ritual because they have an endowment house, the FLDS group.
Yeah, all their endowments are based on the pre-1990.
But someone said that was a little twisted and kinky, and then once it got exposed, they changed it.
Yes.
So, do you think there's covens in the Salt Lake Valley? Because that's what one Glenn Pace said, that there was 12 coven families. I believe it. I mean, just from my research, I believe it.
Yes, I've met some. Gosh, I wish I could go back and look at my in the 70s press. There was a story about this one guy or girl. They're buried up in American Fork, I think. Oh shoot. They were involved in the coven.
So were they women that had like priesthood power, and so they're sort of like witches?
Yes. They do exist. Well, see, I visited polygamous groups too. I went to a couple of their meetings at houses and talked to them.
Because I remember Wilford Woodruff, I think, wrote in his Bible that Emma was the first woman to receive the Melchizedek priesthood after they had the endowment group, the second anointing group.
An anointing. Probably.
Interesting. Yeah, because I'm sure there's some FLDS that think women have the priesthood or some type of other sister power. Yeah.
Something. There are definitely witches and warlocks.
Oh, for sure. You can see that just with the occult stores in downtown Salt Lake. I'm amazed. There's a lot of occult stores where you can buy your own spell making kit. So.
Yeah. Cosmic Airplane isn't there anymore, but that was where I used to go. That and one other had stuff. Now, there's a lot of spiritualism in the valley.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to find out about them, but I never could connect with anybody. I was more interested in the polygamists. Finding out.
I only met one girl, and she got involved with a gal here who has like a new age house. It's over here by where the Muslim Imam, their center is here in downtown Salt Lake. Across from there, she has a house where she does like energy healing. And this lady was really interesting. She lived out in Tooele, said she was she worked for the CIA as like kind of a clairvoyant at some point, and had all these foster or adopted children. And so this girl that I knew, she was looking for a job. She got offered to be kind of the caretaker and have free room and board out there taking care of these kids, and ended up like drugged and trafficked by this woman. And she said the one thing that she told me in the interview, because she tried to report it to police and everything, so she's finally started telling us the story, was all these groups work together. So it's not just, it's the New Age group, and it's not just the fundamentalists or the weird Mormons. Like they all, like if you're in that kind of stuff, they all play in the same field, and they all know who each other are. Like they all know, each other as far as
each secret society knows what the other secret societies are doing.
It's definitely like occulty, a lot of black magic. A lot of ritual abuse, a lot of weird stuff that's just sexual in nature. So
yeah, there's a lot of stuff that goes on. Yeah, but I couldn't. I did my best to try to get information. I just couldn't break in.
Yeah, that's as close as I did. And then I was kind of like, I don't know if I want to break into more of this, because I think to get into that kind of stuff, you have to participate or go through your own hazing ritual before like a temple ceremony. You have to be interviewed and prove yourself worthy. So I was kind of like,
yeah, it's strange. Yeah.
So I know that Russell Nelson's daughter was involved in something, and that the grand jury or something was going to report on it, and that's when Russell Nelson said that the 10-day fast from the media and social media was going to happen that week. And then nothing ever came of the investigation, but I guess he didn't know for sure what the news was going to be. Did you hear anything about that?
That was all after I left, after they kicked
Right.
me out.
yeah.
I mean, I
She was
wasn't
out in
paying.
Bountiful. Yeah, and there is a coven out in Bountiful, because I know a girl in a coven. I don't know if she's a part of like what on that higher level, but she was definitely wanted to play into that I'm a witch, I do black magic kind of thing, had an altar in her house. And her grandparents were definitely into that and had their own thing going on.
See,
But yeah, he told him to take a fast. And then interesting enough, when the Utah County Attorney General was running, his opponent accused him of sex trafficking or some weird stuff. And that never went anywhere. He didn't get reelected, but he basically, his opponent flat out called and said, I think you have been involved in this kind of stuff. And even the sheriff got involved. And it made news, so you can read their back and forth. And, of course, he denied it. Him and his wife were accused of being a part of this group. But after that, it goes silent. And that's what I always feel like in Utah. You're never going to see anyone prosecute or really crack down like they've done in Boys Town, or like where they have this, like when they broke up the mafia in New York City, where they finally cracked the cases, because the church has so much money here and so much influence. You'll never see that nut get shattered as far as someone being able to penetrate it and say, this is what really goes on.
I think it's going to happen soon.
I hope so. I mean,
I think the next 6 months are going to be really interesting. I've shared some things with you, Debbie.
yeah.
I think it's going to be really interesting to watch a lot of stuff happen.
Wouldn't it be interesting if we found out like a higher up church leader was like the puff daddy of Mormonism?
Well, there were stories of a sex house up Parley's Canyon or somewhere that Gordon Hinckley and everybody would go to for sex parties. The Tanners looked into it and could never verify it. I had a copy of the deed.
That's interesting.
There was a website, but it got taken down. And I asked Sandra about it.
That
was back in the 90s.
I'm trying to think. There's a house up Little Cottonwood Canyon. When I grew up, because I grew up in Sandy, it's like you miss it if you don't turn off, because it's a private drive going up Little Cottonwood.
That might be it. That might be it. Yeah.
And there was always rumors, like, every, like, oh, that's the house, like, that's the cat lady house, this is the da-da-da-da house. Like, that house always had, in high school, it was like, oh, that's the occulty sex house. So I think
see, there was a video on YouTube where these people talking about sex parties with Hinckley and others up there. I don't know if it's still on the internet, but there was a lot of, well, see, when I was at BYU, they told me about the nightlife there. I mean, I never was into drugs and drinking. I didn't really like it.
yeah.
And I wanted to find out about it. Never went very far.
I had a friend I was going to say, I have a friend who told me that they actually have rave parties at the Masonic temple down here. sure. You know, rave
Don't.
party, you take ecstasy and rock out.
Jeez, man.
Crazy.
Crazy. I don't.
Well, I will say this, because I know when I lived in Vegas, there was always, but it was more obvious because it's not as illegal or taboo there. In fact, you know, you used to go up the strip and they'd hand you the flyers with the girls and with their phone numbers on it. And so they don't do that anymore. But so to think that, or to know that that happens,
They still.
we knew it happened.
Last
So
time I
to
was
say
in
it
Vegas.
doesn't happen here is kind of naive.
Well, last time I was in Vegas, they were still, and that was only a few years ago. They still hand out flyers with girls. And so
I know
think
girls who used to live in Salt Lake and then on big weekends would come down just to make money and escort in Vegas for the weekends.
That one girl on TikTok who talked about she serviced high people in the church and it got taken down like 2 days later or something like that. Just recently. Here, so there's a lot that goes on.
Somebody said she got paid off.
Could be. That's okay. You guys, Chris Hedges is a journalist and he wrote a book called America the Farewell Tour. And
what's it
one
called?
chapter,
America what?
America the Farewell Tour.
Oh, okay.
And he has a whole chapter in there about the pathology of people in power and the things they do, like the weird sex stuff they do, like with Jim Baker and Jessica Hahn. And the higher up you move in an organization, the weirder it gets. He talks about how the Christians are waiting for Jesus to come so that he'll set everything right. He'll destroy all these bad people and they'll be bloody and stuff. And when you read when I read it, I liken it to Mormonism so much. Conservatives, how these conservatives have really wild sex parties and stuff that you never hear about. I mean, I know somebody here in town who's gone to these parties and told me about it with government officials here in Bakersfield. So apparently the higher up you move, the more and more you get initiated in these crazy things. And we had a county supervisor who attacked his daughter and was attacked with a knife or something, and he got arrested a few months ago, and nobody's heard anything since then. They turned it over to the state attorney general to look into. So weird stuff goes on. I mean, just
well, you
strange.
look at just Hulu, Mormonism, the Mormon housewives, the soft swingers. Hello, they got to start out somewhere. You got to earn your stripes. You start out in your local ward, you move up into the stake.
Yeah.
You get up, you know.
Yeah.
Then you're an influencer, and before you know it, you're getting invited to the parties in Park City.
I can't believe the money those women are making. Just incredible, insane amount of money.
I did life wrong, I swear. I'm like, seriously.
You like what?
I mean, it's because they're getting paid to do nothing. Like, really, what is that?
To live their life.
Nothing.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. Well, you know, our Attorney General, Sean Reyes, he was accused in those allegations against Tim Ballard, those lawsuits that were filed, that Tim Ballard had arranged. There's a private gentleman's club up here in Salt Lake. I don't remember the name of it. Probably better that I don't say it. But he was accused of arranging prostitutes and cocaine for Sean Reyes up there.
Oh,
so you know,
I could tell you stories. When I worked for Lockheed, one of my supervisors used to fly drugs. Well, one day he would work for the Air Force, and the next he would work for the CIA, and they would trade drugs for weapons. This is during Iran-Contra, and when he was in Southeast Asia, he would fly the Golden Triangle. He would pick up heroin and stuff and trade weapons all around that area. So, I mean, the CIA is nothing but a drug running operation. And,
100%.
And they know, the cops know who the bad guys are, and they only take them out when they have to. They don't.
They're all in it together. They're all trying to work.
If
They're all
any of us disappear, please check a CIA black site. Just kidding.
right.
They're just trying to make a buck, make money for their children.
It's the American dream. Come on.
That's
The
right.
church doesn't care how you make your money or how much you make. They only care that you pay your tithing.
Well,
I
and
had a
that's
friend
true
around.
because you think if you had an international church like the Red Cross, you have jurisdiction to fly to any of these countries without search or seizure like you would on a commercial flight. Like you
That's
get
right.
a pretty much an open visa to do whatever you want. So you think of what you could traffic if you could be able to go into any kind of country and what that could buy. You could, like I had this conversation, you could buy anything. You could buy a new kidney, you could buy, you know, a new baby. I don't know what you could buy, but you could buy a lot of stuff, especially without anyone having any oversight because you're a, you know, charitable situation.
Organization. What is it?
That's right.
Sorry, Gene, we just went total conspiracy. I went from Mormon all the way off into the land of.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of conspiracies that are not true, but there's a lot that are. I mean, when I worked for Lockheed, my eyes were open to how dirty and nasty we are as a country and how much we do to other people. That every spy know who his mirror is, and I lost our respect for a lot of things at that time when I worked there. And the division I worked for did nothing but spy planes, spy work. So, I mean,
No, I believe that because I dated a guy who was special ops and he was a drone pilot. And this was after he retired for the military. So he was working for a private company and that worked with the CIA and all the FBI and all these groups. And he was in, you know, Somalia and all these places as a drone dropping stuff.
my
So
son
his
Daniel.
stories are shocking. Now he's gone. He's no longer with us, so I can tell a little bit of that. But when he would tell me his stories, I'm like, oh my gosh.
Well, my son Daniel, his friend Mike, his job was to fly drones along the Iraq, something border to make sure that the heroin was going back and forth in the trucks. He monitored the traffic. That was his job. And he worked for the CIA. So corrupt. Everybody's corrupt. The church is corrupt. We're all corrupt.
Everything. It's
Everything. And it's all coming out, which is great.
It's true.
Wow.
It's true.
So maybe we'll have you back in 6 months when all the news comes out. Or
Well,
maybe,
you want to hear my story?
sure.
Let's continue. Okay, back in 1990, when the internet was kind of, well, I was sending emails when I was at Lockheed, so I knew there was something, but there was this service called Genie, and it was a bulletin board.
Mhm.
And I started post stuff about the church on it. There was a church bulletin board. And then my friend Jay Bell showed up one day. Jay had all these discs with all these documents on them that you got to link to. At least Debbie did. I'll have to send it to you, Gene. And all these documents, I would share them, and I'd share them, just history stuff, with everybody. And my mother knew Tommy Monson somehow. Well, when she went to school, I think he was there, and Reed Benson was there, and all these other people were there. Anyway, so I made a comment about Monson, that my mother knew him or something. And I think I was ward clerk at the time, and I go to bishopric meeting Sunday morning, and my bishop says, "What's this about Tommy Monson, your mom?" And I'm going, "What do you know?" So somebody on this list had called church headquarters to check on me and them. And from that point on, anything I did on the internet was being monitored by somebody. So I was sharing all this stuff first at Genie and then on AOL. They knew I went to Sunstone. They knew I went to MHA. When people would have questions, sometimes the bishop would tell them to talk to me, and I'd just hand them a disc. Here's all the documents, read these. And if you want to know, here's the answer to your questions. In May of 2001, it finally caught up with me, and they decided to kick me out. excommunicate me.
So they excommunicated you for what reasons?
For sharing things on the internet. And if you read my excommunication letter, it doesn't give a reason why I was excommunicated. It doesn't say apostasy, doesn't say anything.
Just because we don't like this guy anymore?
Yeah, basically, yeah.
I think I'm the only one who hasn't been excommunicated, and I became Catholic. I was counting on it.
You're a woman. You're a woman. See.
Right. They still want me.
Well, I was married. My last marriage, my wife was Mormon. She's probably still on the records. They don't know where the hell she is. So they tracked me on the internet for 10 years before they finally did anything. But I got warned 2 or 3 times by my bishop and my stake president, be careful what you say on the internet. I said, I'm going to say what I'm going to say. And now I hear stories about people on Facebook and stuff being called in.
So what do you think? Do you think in the 90s there was just a handful of people doing stuff like that and it was easy to keep track? And now there's like 150,000 people that are...
Well, when I went in for my court, they had copies of things. They would have had to have a box. If you can imagine, when you buy a case of paper, that's how much all these documents you printed them out would be, about a case of paper. And they had some stuff there and asked me questions. I says, I'm just sharing information. That's all I'm doing.
They didn't care where you got the information?
I said, well, some of it's from the archives, some my private archives, some of it's stuff that I got from my friend, just sharing stuff. That's all I'm doing is sharing information. People ask questions.
I think it's gotten too out of control because, like, Tim, you are a unique little unicorn, and that's right before the internet, before real social media was a big thing. Now it's so big with TikTok and everyone podcasting and everyone sharing, and like you being able to send me a file, I can send it to that person. I don't think they can even put a lid on it and control it like they used to.
Well, see, that we were the Xerox priest. When I was at BYU, we'd go and copy stuff and share it. Trading. Yeah, I guess I did trade some things, but mostly I didn't share it to get anything back. Although a lot of things came my way. Yeah,
you were like, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours for copies.
Yeah. Like Ron and Gary would pay us with coupons for food at the Cougar Eat stuff, rather than money they gave.
It's a good deal. It's a good deal.
It's a great deal. Hey, if I was
Ron Prittis actually grew up in my sister ward, and so I knew of him. So right when you're saying the 9th East, 7th East Press, was he involved in that?
Yeah, Ron and Gary. George Smith paid for it, I guess.
And so I heard that he had gone to the dark side, that he was doing stuff for like Sunstone and the underground newspaper or whatever.
7th East Press. Yep.
So you had copies of the 7th East Press. Is there any copies available online?
I don't know. I had copies, like they're gone now. But I know BYU copied them and reduced them all to put in a 2-volume set, I think, for the archives.
So I was close almost to the Hoffman thing a little bit. Like, you remember the Thistle Lake situation, the great thaw of 1983, where they had to wall the streets and they became rivers.
Yeah.
Downtown Salt Lake.
Salt Lake City will be underwater, and yeah. Mike Quinn. It was about the submarine, but headed in his office, Salt Lake City will be underwater by something. It was a headline in the Tribune or something. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And so had I got married in 1983, my wife had been going to BYU, and had I decided to go to BYU and finish my degree or something, we would have been living right around there at the same time, but instead came back home to the San Francisco Bay Area and just did whatever I could to survive here. But I was so close and yet so far from all the things like you were talking about, and just oblivious, right? Just living in the bubble. I knew some things were going on. The only thing that was semi sort of secret, do you remember Howard Ruff in the Rough Times in the late 70s? He was like a really friendly, soft. What's the Armageddon people called where they have supplies?
Prepper.
Prepper. Yeah, he was a soft prepper. He did soft prepping. So
That's funny.
he would
Yeah. Yes.
he had his newsletter, and they would talk about food storage with food that tasted good, and he would have cruises where people could come, and they would talk about the future of the United States. You know, probably the white horse prophecy stuff, the Constitution hanging by a thread. 10 years after that, I was just thinking, none of these prophecies are ever going to come true. You know, there's always been bad stuff, right? Like
We're
parents.
always prepping for the doom. Always
Yeah.
prep for the doom.
And like our parents didn't like Elvis Presley, right? Because and now Elvis Presley is like played in elevators, right? It's just mild. You know.
See, my parents, my Beatles, you know, my parents weren't that way.
Right, you had more democratic.
My parents met in D.C. after the war, and my mother worked for the senator from Wyoming.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, you know, and it was different, you know.
But I remember a history professor once saying, parents always hate what their kids are doing, right? Whatever the kids are doing, whatever the teenagers are doing, there's all kinds of stuff in the literature about how the world's going to come to an end because we're going to hand over the reins to these rapscallions someday, right?
See,
my grandma said every generation thinks they invent sex, drugs, rock and roll. Every generation's had their toe in that water a little bit, you know.
That's right.
I mean, we didn't.
It's like yin and yang. The young generations, they're testing boundaries, and the older generations are setting boundaries.
I didn't have that with my parents, so we didn't conflict much because we got along. We saw things the same way.
But it was like Abby Hoffman said, don't trust anybody over 30. And then like 4 years later, he was over 30.
Yeah.
Who thinks the future is ever going to come, right?
Yeah.
Well, thanks for chatting with us, Tim. We can chat more. We'll have you back someday. And thanks, Debbie.
We'll call this our prediction series for the next.
Yeah, this is sort of like
6 months. Yes.
We're going to teasing the next 6 months from now.
We'll see if the aliens show up by April and May.
That's right.
And something big is going to happen the end of October. This is what all the future.
October 21st.
October surprises.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
We'll see.
We'll see if after talking to you, Tim, my bishop comes over and says, what about this Tim guy? We'll just see, right?
Then you know you've arrived. You're definitely.
What did he say to you in the pre-show and the post-show? That's what we want to know. And what's he sharing with Debbie?
Well, I'll send you the link. I'll send you the link in a minute.
I'm going to have the FBI at my door.
That's right. That's right.
Well, see, I had a friend in church security who told me that they're watching me also.
There you go.
So
some people know it and some people don't, but my wife and I are involved in what was the California tithing lawsuit. And I thought for sure the press was going to come and I need to have a family spokesperson. And it's like, nobody even cares.
No, they don't.
There's so much stuff going on.
They might care
That's
here
right.
soon.
And I, quite frankly, I had lost all interest in Mormonism until this podcast started, you know.
Right. Radio Free Mormon.
Yeah.
That spurred your interest again?
Spurred my interest again. Spurred my curiosity. Coming up with all the stuff I knew about.
That's right, because they did Mormonism Live where you could call in and spill some tea.
Tim's great. We love when Tim calls in. Yeah.
I'll remember, like the story I told the other night about Kimball.
Yeah. Could be anyone on the list. They're all the same.
Yeah, they're all the same. I've got. It's funny. I remember things like I had forgotten that, and I don't know what it was. I guess it was conference weekend, and I remember this story, so I figured I'd call and share it.
All right, everyone. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe and do all the fun stuff. And have a great rest of the year.
Donate. Click
right.
Click the button.
Somehow send money.
Send money. To them,
the dollar
I-
37 per
they didn't
day
want-
of ad revenue is not enough.
right on, right on.
Right. Thanks a lot.
All right.